Hey everybody, I think I'm going to leave my camera off today. I've been in a lot of meetings and I have a little monitor mount light that I use when I'm in meetings or streaming, and I just kind of don't feel like having a light in my face the rest of the evening. Today I think I am going to continue working on Moonbreak, where I left off a few weeks back. We'd finished the Game Jam version. Game Jam version is basically a little exploration game. Goes through and it gives you instructions. Actually, if we're gonna look at this. Okay. So it gives you a quick little vignette. The moon's collapsing, you need to escape. Some instructions on how the game works. Throw your bots and supplies. Get more bots. Find the ship parts. The player can steer the cursor around. You can collect these little crates that'll generate more bots. Those up. Repeat. Then the goal from there is to find 3 missing ship parts. So I had some other plans to work on with that. I had a list of things that I worked on during the game jam, and then when that version ended, I had some remaining to-do items that I had saved for the full version. So originally, the idea for this in my head was that it would be a procedurally generated Pikmin style game. There'd be different types of bots. I was kind of merging it with another game idea that I had, which is where some of these items like building interiors come from. In another game, let's open some stuff up here. The level sketch, we need new drawing. So in another game that I had worked on previously, I had an idea that you would have a base interior. You would have this base interior that was sort of your home base to manage, and there'd be NPCs and maybe different levels, and the ultimate goal was to try and leave the moon in some sort of rocket. And you'd have different scientists and things like that that would give you sort of missions or be upgrade stations, and there'd be sort of a 2-phase gameplay where one, you're here working with scientists, repairing things, maybe doing sort of a resource management mini game at the base to get things ready, and then the next phase you would actually go to an exterior location. You'd have a limited amount of time. Your base would be some little collection of bases somewhere in the world, and maybe there'd be other little base compounds that had supplies that you needed, but they were full of some sort of enemies. So you would take a rover and make your way to another base with your limited amount of time. You would go to another interior, so that's interior to exterior, and then this exterior would then go to another interior, and then in that interior it'd be more of a multi screen level that you explored, looking for resources and fighting enemies. And you'd have to do all that on a limited amount of time so that you could return to your base before storms or some sort of attack or something dangerous that would stop you from successfully getting back to your base. A lot of those mechanics kind of fell by the wayside as I worked on this Game Jam version, and now I'm wondering if I want to try and bring any of that back in it obviously ended up being a very different game. In this one, this wasn't even really the original Pikmin style prototype. This was more of a platformer, and you would platform through the interior, have a little sort of driving mini game to get to another base, and then platform around fighting enemies. The art kind of came from that, but this Pikmin game ended up being something very different. So I'm wondering if I wanted to try and bring back in any of these mechanics or just keep that entirely separate. And I'm kind of leaning towards the latter. I think there's too much going on in that other idea to really bring it into this one. I'm torn on whether or not I need any sort of building interiors. I also kind of wanted to have some cutscenes in this game where maybe you're at least one initial cutscene, have some sort of airlock, have a little scientist guy or technician or something that's telling you why you need to go collect the missing ship parts, what's going on with the moon, why is there a problem here, you know. Have little text blurbs and tell some sort of story about what's going on and why you need to go off and do these things. I don't know if that needs to be an enterable interior. Maybe this is just sort of an intro cutscene. I think we'll come back to that. So that was the building interiors. Different bot types, bomb bots and electric bots. I wanted to have different spawners. And then I guess if I have different spawners, I need to have different types of supply crates. Supply crates indicate, I guess right now they're just sort of one color. I never really liked this crate design, but it matched the front of the ship idea that I had originally come up with. If I go with this, I need some way to indicate that what type of bot each of these things is spawning, which I could do with a basic recolor, but it'd be nice to have an icon that represents what type of bot or drone it is. And then those different types of bots need puzzles. So maybe bomb bots are the only thing that can actually destroy this terrain. And then electric bots can, ideally the goal there was they would connect electric puzzles. How do I, oh, there we go. I don't think I loaded the right palette. I do have two different oranges, but this looks off. I think this was originally yellow. Maybe I got rid of the yellow, and that's why that's off. So something else that I'm trying to be mindful of too is if I make exploding bots, some sort of bomb bot, how do you replenish those bomb bots? Do they just sort of blow up? Maybe it's not a bomb bot, maybe it's like some sort of impact bot, or I could, you know, come up with some other mechanic for it so that it sort of does a slam, cracks any rocks nearby or breaks rocks nearby, and then returns back to the player. Go to our title, or no, we want to go to main. And while we're testing, we'll change this. Just load the game. Oops. I was wondering why I was getting both. And then procedural map generation is something else that I could work on. If I did that now, it'd be easier to implement a version of procedural generation right now because you just have to have 3 objects placed around the map that you're collecting. Procedural generation will get a lot more difficult if I have electrical gates and puzzles and bomb bots and things like that. Enhanced shadows is something else that I wanted to explore. I don't know how important this is anymore. The only thing that really casts a shadow is the bots and the carried objects, and I think the simple color shadow is fine for those right now. The alternative was going to be something like this. So that as the shadows move over sprites, they adjust the color palette just where they overlap. I don't think I have any big enough shadows to really warrant implementing that. Lose screen's not something I ever implemented because there's not really a way to lose. This version of the game, you just explore until you find all the parts. There's no time limit. There's no constraints really of any kind. Something that some people gave me feedback that they liked the fact that there wasn't time pressure. You could just sort of explore casually and find the parts and then win. And I've been thinking a bit about wholesome games or, more comfy games where you don't have those time pressures or you're not trying to fight enemies or kill things or shoot things. And originally I was planning on having some sort of enemy that you were fighting off, but maybe that's not what I want to go after in this. Maybe I should keep it no time constraint and maybe still add different types of bots and procedural generations so that it can be replayed. And then maybe for the narrative, there's not a looming threat of the moon being destroyed or something coming to the moon, but instead it could just be that your character is stranded. Maybe they're just sort of longing to go back home, or their mission has ended, but their rocket's no longer functional. Something that's a little bit more benign and less of a fight things, kill things, run for your life sort of idea. Let's see, where am I at for tokens? Yeah, we were getting really close to the token limit. Character limit also is pretty far up there. Let's see, debug code is still in, so that needs to be commented out, or could be commented out for a final release. I probably have some helpers that could be cut out. I think for a more detailed version of this game, though, I need to start by splitting some things up into different cartridges. There is probably a lot I could do to compress the number of characters and the tokens. But things like the splash screen, I've been considering moving that out of the main cartridge anyway. Let's take a look at that. I'm forgetting how to load cartridges, so I'm looking that up. This is the text manual. I was wondering why it looked different. I thought there was some additional argument you could pass to load. Maybe not. I'm wondering if I would have the splash screen be a cartridge. Now the splash and the title could all probably be in one cartridge, and then the main gameplay is in its own cartridge. I might be able to get away with just 2 cartridges. Maybe the splash screen, the title, a intro cutscene, and a win cutscene are all in one cartridge. And then the gameplay, all of that logic is in its own cartridge. So then you only have a loading screen when you start playing and right at the end of playing. So if that's the case, then I want to try and move all the game logic into its own cart. And then I guess it depends on how much art I want in the different cutscenes and the title. Because if all that has to fit inside of the main Moonbreak.p8, then it might be a bit much. Maybe cutscenes end up in their own cartridge. So I've copied over the code from main.lua and I'm pulling it directly into the cart because I think I'm going to want, well, I will want each main to work differently. Scene class is nil. I'm loading game. Oh, no, it worked. Okay. And so with some of that stuff cut out, so if I take out the title, the ending, the instructions, the splash screen, if I'm only ever using one scene, I could probably even trim out a lot of this scene logic, and the game logic would just run directly down here. I'll save that until I need to optimize though. But that cut out a good amount of tokens and characters, just trimming that stuff out and separating the game into its own cartridge. So then if I wanted to use that in instructions, now we do scene load game. So instead, this would change to just load game.p8. And then in game.lua, we have this scene load ending. This would have to load a different cartridge. If I'm just doing two cartridges, it would have to load the title cartridge again, but somehow tell it which scene to load. Let's just see if this works so far. So instead of this one, I want to load Moonbreak. Then play, then we should go through the instructions. Then this should show us a little disc in the top left corner. Nope, did not work. Main.lua line 24. No scene.current. So why is there no scene.current? In instructions, we press the button, which should load the game cartridge. And then that should be it. That should be running in scene current update. Instructions line 49. Unless, oh, I'm overwriting load because I'm changing the environment. So it's calling load on scene. It's calling scene load, just like this, but it's calling it on itself. So I need to reference the global load function here. And I refer to that as _G. So if I call this underscore g.load, that might work again. Yeah, so then we get the disk loading, and then we're in the game. Okay, that loading's not even that bad. I've always avoided multi-cart because I didn't want to have the loading indicators. Okay. That makes me actually wonder about splitting my splash cart, or splash into its own cartridge. Let's see, the splash just needs, probably needs all of this. Splash doesn't use game objects. It does use scenes and async. I don't even know if I need the helpers. Definitely don't need auto tile, don't need a star. And I don't need any of this other stuff. And none of this either. And then, actually we don't even need splash.lua. We'll leave it for now, I don't want to pull all of this stuff out. I don't think we need the button extensions. We do need async. We don't need to sort entities. And this was our broad phase, making sure we're pooling entities that are visible. Let's get rid of all that. Load splash. Take out the log. Take out the debug. And then this is going to have to load. So that'll load that. And then main.lua should load title now instead. That is loading title, so then if we load our splash, splash is looking for game object. Oh, scene is a game object. So I was wrong, I do need a little bit more. Just that. And then wait is in the helpers file, but it probably shouldn't be. Wasync is used, or async uses wait. So that should be here. And then lerp is in the helper. And I'm using lerp in async. So maybe I should just pull in helpers anyway. think wait should still be in the async file. Let's see, async, line 15. Attempt to call lerp. Is that, maybe it just didn't load. Yeah. So that's the other loading indicator that I'm not sure if I want to have. I could actually start the load right after the animation finishes. Because I do this wait 30 frames and then load. But if the loading indicator is going to take a little bit anyway. Yeah, it's not too bad. I used to have a transition. Yeah. I have a version of the splash screen with transitions. And I think if I'm going to have the extra token space, especially if the splash screen is its own cartridge, then I think I want to bring the transition logic back in. This did rely on some other helper functions. So this slowly changes the palette over time, and then these transition tables are the colors to iterate through. And there's this website that helps you generate these fade tables. So you take your target color and the source color, or let's see, source palette. That's what it is. So source and then the target color. So a lot of times I'll switch black for the dark blue. We'll bring in a different red, bring in different shades of green, and then you can preview what it would look like fading between those palettes. So in this case, I have my splash screen colors in the splash transition table, and then it'll fade from to and from those. That's a different version. I think I used to have this fade in and fade out. I think this version's just fading out. So we need to load in Splash P8. We need our transition helper. And then in transition, there were some references that need to be changed. Last time I worked on this, I was calling things like add routine, but I think I want this to just be async now. And I can actually define this inline. I'm not sure why I'm defining this here. I think we can probably actually just do this. Oh yeah, so this is a fade out, a callback, and then a fade in. And I don't think I'm going to need that here. Let's see if I can get this to run at least. So in Splash, I don't know if I want to reset the palette. And I think I want to bring back in the wait if I'm going to transition. So we'll wait 30 frames. Load the splash screen again. Okay. I think I would need to set up a transition table for the game, but I'm wondering now if my main cartridge, actually let's rename this. Right now it's called Moonbreak, but I want to move Moonbreak to title.p8. And then in title, we'll pull in transition helper. And then main shouldn't just load the title. Actually, no, it will load the title. Title.lua will start playing. I need to change this transition function because I want to call. I'm going to start the music, initialize the stars, do all these things. And then maybe I just want to call transition with nothing. No, okay. Right now the way the transition works, when I load the game, I want it to do pretty much nothing. But then it's going to do a fade out, so a fade out from nothing to black, then load the title scene and fade back in. So that would be a transition. And then can't find transition. Current nil value main 25. because there is no scene yet because we are transitioning. So if we have a current scene, then update the scene. Likewise, if we have a current scene, draw the scene. So I think we're fading out from whatever was currently drawn on the screen. So on initialization, maybe we want to make sure we clear the screen and then do a transition. So then if we load the splash screen, I loaded the wrong cartridge, I think. So if we go back to splash.p8, now that loads the splash scene. Now that's loading Moonbreak, but it needs to load title. Yeah, so now that will, it keeps my splash screen entirely separate from any other cartridge, which means none of the tokens from my splash screen will ever count towards the rest of the game. But it does put a little loading indicator. This is something that I wanted to do just to generalize the splash screen. So now the splash screen will always be separate. Right now it depends on all of these different helpers. And I think eventually I would try and inline anything that this depends on, which I could actually save it as a p8.png. If I saved it as a p8.png file, then it would inline everything and it wouldn't really matter. I would always be able to reference that. But I think I need a way to dynamically change which cartridge would be loaded after it does the intro animation. I could put that in a Lua file that gets included. So Splash could always, well, actually if it gets inline then that won't help. I think there's a way that I could load dynamically. There's probably a way that I could pull it from memory or import it at runtime. I can't think right now how I would do that. I think all the includes are going to get inlined. But it'd be nice if I have the splash screen as a single file that gets passed around. It's still not perfect. Right now if I load the splash screen and then I went into sprites, there's a whole bunch of map data and sprites and everything, audio. And I wouldn't want any of this to be in the splash. It's not hurting anything, but it's just unnecessary. I'm thinking I kind of want that splash screen, or not the splash screen, the fade out, fade in transition to also be on the transition from the title to the game. But right now if I do that, that means that the title cartridge already has the transition logic, but the game would also have to include the transition logic, which is a whole bunch of extra tokens. probably not too bad. This is a string, so it's a single token. Yeah, it might not be horrible. That's something I'll have to explore adding later. I really want to add procedural generation at some point, which I guess the procedural generation could be its own cartridge. It could generate the map and then update the memory of the map data for the main game. So that might actually cut down on some logic that's in the game cartridge in the future. So that means the title, you'd go through a little intro, a cutscene, then disk load into a map generator, which would hopefully run fairly quickly, and then another disk load into the game. It's probably not horrible. Those loads go pretty quick. So now I've brought in some transition logic, and I'm fading between 3 different cartridges. We start with the splash screen, which loads the title, and then title loads the game. And then the game ending doesn't really work right now. So the ending would potentially need to be its own cartridge to make this a little bit cleaner. Or I would have to pass data in some way back to the cartridge where the ending was shared. I think maybe intro and ending cutscenes are just their own cartridges. Then that gives me a lot of room to play around with like coroutines for animation, and I get the full sprite space. I'm not cannibalizing any space for artwork. And so I could go all out on anything I want to do on both cutscenes. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards that. I think the instructions scene is probably going to go away eventually. Right now the instructions, oops, not copy. The instructions scene was something I threw in really quickly for the Game Jam version, just to provide players with some form of intro that tells them what to do. I always like having the controls spelled out in the game rather than in the itch.io page. Okay, so we'll copy those. Where the player would typically load the ending, now we'll do a global load. And we'll load ending.p8. Then we need to go to title. Title is loading instructions, but I called that intro. I didn't clean these up in title yet either. Title I don't think needs most of this. Let's see, title.lua, what am I initializing? I am initializing supply, person, pod with door, star. I don't have bots on the title. We do have a bot. Oh, that's right. When you initialize a player or person, it spawns a bot. maybe for now I just leave these extra includes. I'll clean them up later. So let's see, intro. I think main.lua might go away. This is only relevant for... This one's only relevant for the game. Scene update, scene draw, those are relevant. Entity sorting is probably only important for the game. I may end up needing Y sorting on the intro and ending if I end up animating player positions and things like that. Async updates need to be in everything. Visible entities, this is only for the game. Yeah, I'm not rendering anything else off screen, and even if I was, I wouldn't be too concerned about rendering off screen objects in anything but the game. This isn't just, it's not just the off-screen. Let's see, let me take a closer look at this. So we set up a table, an empty table of visible entities. Then inside of, when we iterate over every entity, we get its sprite. We get its sprite position, and this is just some calculations based off of where I am storing the origin position. I'm making the origin of every entity the bottom center, so I have to calculate the x, y, width, and height. And then I get the rectangle of the view, the x, y, width, and height of the camera. And then I do an axis aligned bounding box check to see if that entity is within the view, and then I add it to the visible entities table. This is so that later on I can only do checks on visible entities and draw visible entities. But so that I don't have to iterate over all of the entities more than one time after I've added them, after I've evaluated them and potentially added them to the visible entities table, then I call update on each entity. And so I want that update to always happen. So really, I could leave almost everything that's here, and the only thing that I need to change in each of these cartridges is the init function. So maybe I'll go to each of these and I'll bring main back in. See, intro and ending already have it. Game.p8. I removed main in favor of doing all of this, but I think I want to keep it. Yeah, I want to keep it. I just want to replace init in everything. Even the splash screen doesn't really need that additional logic. But I don't think it would hurt. I did remove all the entity stuff. That's a lot to require in this. Maybe splash is a special case. Okay, and then we're into intro, intros, init. Intros init just needs to load. Introduction? No, instructions. Instructions. And we don't need game title, splash, any of that. Scene class is nil. Oh, I need to use a colon here. Colon makes that scene.load scene instructions. Like that. So without the colon, we're missing, we're passing instructions as the scene argument, and then nil as the, or instructions as the scene class, and nil as the actual scene that we want to load. Main line 12. What did I do? Helpers, line 41. I wonder if I was relying on something from the title. I shouldn't be, because all these entities should be cleaned out when I transition between scenes. So the error in helpers line 41 is because I'm trying to compare two circles, but the second argument is nil. And that's coming from bot.lua on line 119. So main line 12 is probably, yeah, that's where I'm calling update. Then that goes into entity.update, which then goes into bot. And on 119, so we're checking the distance between the bot and the player, and it's saying player is nil. And I think that's because in the intro I never set up a player. I was reusing the player that was in the title. And yeah, because the player is set up as a global. So then in instructions.lua, I would need to set up this player also. So I was actually already creating a player, I just wasn't setting them to the global instance. This is something I probably want to change in the future. So I don't want to depend on this global. Okay. I think we're having the same problem here. So we transition from the introduction to the game and we don't have a global player. Make sure I jot that down as a bug. Okay, so then the game loads. We do scene load game. And then on initialization, we do set a global player when we find the player. Oh, our main, so this, maybe that was a red herring. Game.p8 has the wrong reference to main. Yeah, okay. So let's try again. Let's load the splash screen. So right now I have the title in its own cart, which might be overkill. I'll have to play with that. Maybe I want to do something with that and add a lot more to the title screen. Especially if I start adding any sort of settings or any other additional logic, it would be nice to have the extra tokens, but it could also be an unnecessary load between the title and the introduction. So we step through the introduction. So there was no music because we changed loading. Right now the title screen starts the music. So instead we would have music start when the game starts. Be after the auto tile is complete. So that, I didn't realize that this one, this, what did I call this? Supply couldn't find a path to the spawner that's up above it because there's something blocked over on the side. So the A-star pathfinding happens in a coroutine. That's why these sit here for a second, because it's trying to calculate a path throughout the whole map and it can't find it, so it plays a little error sound. That's something I missed in playtesting. So if I throw these all in here, this is actually going to try and path out this way, which is fine. That can carry, those bots can carry that across the gap. A bug with my visibility renderer too, calculating things off by a couple of pixels. I'm noticing some of the larger sprites kind of pop in. So in the bottom left of the screen right there, you can see the left side of the spawner, the cable's missing until I get just to the right spot and it pops in. That little sound effect that just played was one of the ship parts making it back to the ship. Something else I'm thinking about changing is instead of those parts automatically being carried back, when the player gets one of the ship parts, when the bots are carrying the ship part, the player would have to escort it back. If I go back up here, the little center module of the ship should be in place. All these bots are just hanging out. But I think it might connect better for the player if you actually have to walk the part back. But I also don't want it to be tedious for you to walk the part back every time. Right now, yeah, I think it would be tedious because all you do is explore, find the part, and then if you have to walk it back, then it's a lot of back and forth for no reason. If I add some sort of obstacle that stops the bots from getting back by themselves, then it might make sense for the player to have to escort. Collision detection is wrong on these buildings. So this area was intended to be sort of the old base, and I wanted to have more props laying around when I was designing the level towards the end of the game jam. I had to slap this together really quickly. Same with another area that I'll go to in a second. That's the cockpit module, so those will carry that back. The music in this is also placeholder. It's made by someone who's pretty well known in the PICO-8 community, Gruber. He's got a lot of, 2 or 3 Pico Tunes cartridges that have music that you can use in your games. So this was something that I threw in really quickly also at the last minute. I'm starting to lean towards the game eventually having more of a lighthearted feel, so I'll probably do something that's not so somber. also need to work on the logic for how the bots are clumping together. So if I had opened up that passage before I got this part, these bots would have flown right over the gap. But I forgot to do that, so they're going to fly all the way around. Basically done with the bots at this point. I have a maximum of 6 bots carrying anything at one time. Oh, I think they took a shortcut. They're flying over a gap up here. Because this was for the Eggplant podcast game jam, I also had another little secret. It was intended to be found once you had the bots. There was nothing stopping you from going here at the beginning of the game either, except for the fact that it would be really tedious to go through all these rocks with a bunch of bots. So if you come through here once, you can come through at any point, you get the special eggplant for the Eggplant podcast. Realizing the ship parts move fairly slow when you know what you're doing in this too. So if this is something that I expected players to replay, I think I want those parts to move a little bit faster. And maybe there's a compromise where the bots move a certain speed and they're away from the player, but they'll move even faster if the player's running with them. I don't think I set up the ending cartridge, so this probably won't work. Yeah, there's no init function. So it loaded the ending cartridge and then nothing happened. So instead that should load ending. And this would need instructions, game, title, splash, any of that. Load ending. Yeah, so it would have just snapped straight to this. And that's what also makes me think I should have the transition in the game as well. But transition needs to take a couple of different options. So I could potentially make transition a class, and then I could have a couple different functions. So what if transition equals class extend table, and then transition has a call meta method, it gets a function, and that would be the equivalent of this. And then I'm thinking of what else, what are the methods that we want to have? So maybe transition in is function with env, callback. And then that's, actually this, if we were calling this directly, it would need to have the same async logic, but we would just fade in and then do the callback. And out would be the same thing. But it would be like this. Or no, it's exactly this. But inside of the async call. Is that what I want? So then I would get rid of all this. Let me reference. So what this underscore underscore call is you can define a table. So I said A was an empty table, and A dot or set meta table of A to A, and A class equals, or not class, call equals function. Now even though A is a table, when I reference A with parentheses, it'll call this function. But I need to double check. So when I extend a class, I get a table, and I set that table's meta method to just this index. I think I could do that. So I could say it's meta table, it has an index and also a call method, and it calls its own call method if it's defined. And then what I'm hoping that will do is make it so that I don't need to replace this implementation. Anywhere that I'm calling transition with parentheses and a callback. Actually, I won't have an env here, which is fine. We're not actually using that. But anywhere that I was calling transition like this before would potentially still work. I'm just wondering if I want to move this fade function inside of the transition class. Let's see if that still works. Missing a comma? No? What am I doing wrong here? Missed a symbol. This function async call function. Which actually that's another change I wanted to make to async, because that's doing the same thing. Instead of having call like this, I can make it underscore underscore call. Then anywhere where I reference async colon call, that should just change to async. See, transition line 11. Yield unexpected. What is it not liking here? Unexpected symbol near in. I'm wondering if it just doesn't like the word in. Close. I think maybe I do need this because I think call actually passes the table itself as the first argument. Yep. Okay, all of that was so that I have separate functions on a transition, so I can just fade in or just fade out. So the splash screen should actually transition, fade out, and then do this. Yeah, so that saves a handful of frames when it was trying to fade, or no, it was fading out. I guess it doesn't really save anything because the callback would have stopped it from doing the fade back in. And then the title, same thing here. We don't want to transition out, then load the title and transition in. We just want to load the title and then transition in. And this is going to throw an error because we didn't define a function. This underscore no-op variable is something that I define, I think, in my globals. Oh, yeah, I'm just blind. It's down here. Yeah, so no-op is just an empty function. So because I always want to be able to reference callback, The other option is that anywhere I use it, I could just say callback and callback. Actually, I don't know if that works in PICO-8 as now that I'm saying it. I think I might have to do a conditional check if callback. So I can either conditionally check it everywhere that I need it, or I can initialize it to an empty function. So as I am saying that, I think I actually want to just do the check. I think it's 3 or 4 tokens there. But it's also going to be a function call, which counts towards cycles. I think it counts more towards CPU cycles in PICO-8 than doing a conditional check. I think it's probably better to do the conditional check. Yeah. So now it can fade right in. Something else I was wondering about is whether I should actually fade out at all in the splash. So actually, maybe we do a full transition here and don't clear the screen. I'm wondering if that will retain the image from the splash screen. I think it will. Okay, so it does retain the image and fade out the splash screen, but it's using the wrong palette. So I think I actually want to go back to the splash screen handling its own fade out. The difference there was that the disk loading animation would play over top of the splash screen instead of over the black screen. And I think it would have made it feel a little bit faster because you get the little intro jingle, the disk starts loading, and so that artificial 30-second wait would have just happened with the disk loading, and then the title screen would fade out and fade back in. Maybe I'll still change it to that in the future. It just means that I need to copy over the transition table, the splash transition table needs to be brought in, and then I need to load the splash transition, or assign the splash transition table to the global transition table, fade the image out, switch back to the games transition table, and fade the game in. Those are little fine-tuning details that I can address later. So let's go to game and let's bring in transition helper here. And then where we load, instead we will transition, fade out, and then after we've faded out, load the ending. And then ending, does ending have transition yet? Yeah, it does. So then when we get to the ending, the initialization of the ending should fade in, or should load the ending and then fade in. And then in game, to test this, if player control and button, if player control, ship instance complete. Comment these out, say if true, then what did I do? I don't have a cursor. Oh, because this first line is disabling the cursor. So we should just be able to walk over here and end the game. We didn't fade out. Oh, because that's fine. On follow stop, we should transition fade out. And then after fading out, load the ending. We're not getting a fade out. From 0 to 16, we're going through the transition table. Which should go through all of these steps, getting to 0. So that should be fading out. Unless I'm stopping my async callbacks for some reason. We should fade out and then call the callback. Should load that scene. On follow stop. So once the player gets to the ship, call this transition. We don't ever see the color change at all. The game's not even fading in at the start. which we haven't implemented. But I wonder if this would even work. Yeah, the palette's wrong because we haven't set up a transition table for the palette that I'm using. But it does fade out and fade back in. So I know that works in the game. What if we called a regular transition? So we're not seeing any transition happening here. The transition is an asynchronous call. Which should be happening. So we disable the player control. That stops us from taking any additional action after the game's been completed. On follow stop. It's called in the follow method. Yeah, so follow will check if the distance is less than the follow distance, then on follow stop gets called. On follow stop. Unless, I wonder if this is being called multiple times. So if it's being called multiple times, then it's spinning up a whole bunch of async functions or coroutines that are going to keep trying to iterate over that palette order, the transition table, and it's going to constantly be looping back, or not looping, but starting another coroutine that is setting the initial value in the palette table, so it's always going to set everything back to its full color, the first value in the table, which is the color that it starts as. So my first thought was, when I call on follow stop, to then clear on follow stop, but I don't remember everywhere that I'm using it, and I may not want that to happen. Yeah, like here, a carryable, if you clear out its on follow stop, then it will never have that again. So I probably need another condition. I could clear its target at that point. Maybe instead of making any changes here, I do them here. So when it reaches it, then player.state equals idle. So it doesn't try and do anything else. It stops trying to follow at that point if I change the player state. Hey, Vladimir. I'm doing all right. How about you? Yeah, there we go. So that gives us our transition out now. And then our ending scene needs to load title again. Yeah, so I think that gets us back into a full loop with separate cartridges. Cool. So that gives me more cards to work with. Let's see if I load title. So let's start with splash. Check info. Yeah, so splash by itself doesn't take up much. We could even omit the debug. There's still a lot in here that doesn't need to be in here. This doesn't need any of the map data. It doesn't need any of the sprite data. I could probably do this quicker with a couple lines of code and just reset the memory. Oh, maybe not quicker. I didn't save it. So I made those changes and then I ran it and it loaded a different cartridge. That's something I need to be careful about. I think I pushed this already. I think that's going to wrap it up for me today. So I mostly did some refactoring, introduced the transition class. I split up the cartridges into, I split up the game into separate cartridges. That gives me a little bit of space to start working on more of the game. Let's see what our game is at now. Yeah, so a little over 1,000 tokens available, close to 20,000 characters. Compressed size is getting up there. I probably want to trim a bit more as I get into adding more game logic. I think, did I take everything out of game? I think I might have. Yeah, it just has the scene class and then game and a lot of the stuff that it needs. I think there's a lot of code that I got kind of sloppy with towards the end of the game jam also, especially in a lot of these instances. So I need to revisit some of that and see if I can clean up tokens. As far as features, I'm still thinking of potentially maybe not player health and respawn anymore. I don't know if I like the idea of enemies. I think I want more just puzzles. HUD, I also don't know if I need much of a HUD. Displaying different bot types is the only reason I really need that anymore if I'm not going to have health or respawn. Title screen, lose screen. Enhanced shadows I don't think I'm going to do. I'll put it way down here just in case I want to revisit it. Collection animation. That's where the little supply crates drop in and they kind of get, they break apart into little particles and then a bot spawns. I think I still want to change that. That was all thrown together pretty quickly. The little collector things here. That was my first idea, and it being a game jam, I just kind of ran with it. So you get a little platform that you drop a box on, and then it spits out a bot. But I think I want to come up with something else there. Whatever is happening with the bots or the supplies. And the supply crates themselves, I think I'm going to change also. I don't have an example of those on here. Yeah, this little box with a K on it. I want to come up with some other icon for the supplies. It might just be more of a disc like Pikmin, but I wanted to find something a little more diegetic that the bots would need to be collecting. And then of course the different bot types, that's going to be the big thing. I think that's where I'm going to need a lot of available tokens. So next week might be hunting down tokens and optimizing things. We will see. But that is going to do it for me for today. Thanks for hanging out. I will see everybody next week.